The silver scent of rain and ozone usually brought Celia peace, but tonight, it smelled like a funeral. She stood in the center of the pack square, wrists bound in iron cuffs that burned against her skin, while hundreds of eyes watched her with contempt. The bonfire crackled behind her, casting dancing shadows across faces she'd once called family. Now they looked at her like she was something rotten, something that needed to be cut away before it spread. I, Edris Belmont, Alpha of the Silver Moon, find you guilty of high treason. The voice she once loved, the voice that had whispered promises against her skin just weeks ago, now boomed across the square with all the warmth of a winter grave. Celia's breath caught, and she looked up through the rain beginning to fall, searching for any flicker of recognition in those amber eyes. Any hint that the man she'd bonded with still existed beneath the cold mask of the Alpha. There was nothing. Edris stepped into the moonlight, his broad shoulders rigid beneath his ceremonial cloak, jaw carved from stone. He held a scroll. The evidence, they'd called it. A letter bearing her handwriting, promising Pack's secrets to the enemy in the south. She'd never written those words. She'd never even thought them. But when she'd tried to speak, to defend herself, the council had silenced her with a single gesture. Aluna does not argue with her Alpha's judgment. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, still flat beneath the thin dress they'd forced her to wear. The secret hum of a second heartbeat pulsed there, fragile and fierce. 3 weeks along. She'd planned to tell him tonight before the trial, before the world had cracked open beneath her feet. Now that tiny flutter was the only thing keeping her upright, the only reason she didn't collapse under the weight of her shattered bond. I reject you as my mate, Edris continued, his voice carrying over the gathering storm. Lightning split the sky behind him. I sever our bond before the moon goddess and this pack. You are no longer Luna. You are no longer Pack. The bond snapped. Celia gasped as invisible claws ripped through her chest, shredding the golden thread that had connected them since the night they'd first touched. The pain was blinding white-hot, like having her soul torn in half. Her knees buckled, but she forced herself to stand. She wouldn't fall. Not in front of them. Not in front of him. When she looked up again, something had changed in her eyes. A flicker of gold that burned brighter than the bonfire, brighter than the lightning. The sign of the royal bloodline, dormant for generations, now awakening in her moment of greatest betrayal. But Edris didn't see it. He was already turning away, his duty done. I banish you to the Deadlands, he said, his back to her now, addressing the pack instead of the woman whose life he was ending. If you are seen after sunrise, the sentence is death. No one spoke. No one moved to help her as the guards unlocked her cuffs and shoved her toward the gates. Rain soaked through her dress, plastered her dark hair to her face, but Celia barely felt it. She was somewhere beyond pain now, in a place where emotion turned to ice and survival became the only thought that mattered. She paused at the edge of the forest, where the torchlight ended and true darkness began. The Forbidden Forest. The Deadlands. Where rogues hunted and ancient things stirred in shadows that never saw dawn. No wolf had survived there in living memory. Celia turned back one final time. Her hand still pressed protectively over the secret growing inside her. She found Edris in the crowd, standing tall and terrible, his face betraying nothing. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him what he'd just destroyed. But something stopped her. Instinct, perhaps, or the fierce maternal rage already taking root alongside the child in her womb. He didn't deserve to know. He had just orphaned his own heir, cast away the future of the very kingdom he claimed to protect. And one day, when the truth finally came to light, when the prophecy his own grandmother had whispered about began to unfold, he would understand exactly what he had forfeited tonight. Celia didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply turned and walked into the shadows, carrying the true heir. The child prophesied to unite the fractured northern clans, away from the only home she'd ever known. Behind her, the pack gates slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the mountains. Ahead in the darkness, Yellow Eyes watched and waited. And inside her, against all odds, 2 heartbeats continued their defiant rhythm. Before we go into details, click subscribe, like and comment where you are watching from. I will be glad to know this story gets as far to all of Canada, United States of America, Australia, Africa and even United Kingdom, so kindly let me know where you are watching from. Let's continue. The coldest night. The first step into the Deadlands felt like walking into her own grave. Celia stumbled over exposed roots, her bare feet already bleeding from the rocky path leading away from Silver Moon territory. The forest swallowed her whole, thick canopy blocking out the moon, shadows pressing in from all sides like living things. Behind her, the sounds of the pack celebrating her exile faded into nothing. Ahead, only silence and the occasional crack of branches that might have been wind or might have been something worse. She walked until her legs gave out, collapsing against a massive oak tree whose bark bit into her back through the soaked fabric of her dress. Only then, hidden in darkness where no one could witness her weakness, did she allow herself to break. The sobs came from somewhere deep and primal, the place where the mate bond had lived before Edris ripped it away. Her chest felt hollow, carved out, a canyon where her heart used to be. She pressed both hands against her ribs as if she could physically hold herself together, but the grief poured out anyway, ugly, gasping, desperate. How could he not know? The question circled her mind like a vulture. How could he look at me and not see the truth? But she knew the answer. Edris had seen what he wanted to see. A traitor, a weakness to be eliminated, a problem solved. The law was absolute. Evidence was absolute. His love, apparently, was not. A sharp cramp seized her abdomen, and Celia froze mid-sob. Her hands flew to her stomach, terror replacing grief in an instant. The baby. In all the chaos, the pain, the banishment, she'd forgotten about the fragile life inside her. No. She forced herself to breathe, slow and steady, the way her grandmother had taught her during her healer training. Stress could cause a miscarriage this early. She couldn't lose this too. She wouldn't. The cramp eased, and in its wake, she felt it, that subtle flutter, that whisper of a second heartbeat syncing with her own. Still there. Still fighting. I'm sorry, she whispered into the darkness, her voice raw. I'm so sorry, little one. I should have told him. I should have. But no. A different truth settled over her like armor. If she had told Edris about the pregnancy during the trial, would it have changed anything? Or would he have simply taken the child and banished her anyway, believing the baby deserved better than a traitor for a mother? The thought sent ice through her veins. She couldn't go back. Even if she wanted to, the sentence was death at sunrise. And she wouldn't beg, wouldn't grovel for the scraps of mercy from a man who had looked her in the eyes and chosen law over love, duty over the woman who'd given him everything. Celia pressed her forehead against her knees, feeling the last warmth drain from her body as the night deepened. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, wild and hungry. Another answered from a different direction. The rogues were circling, drawn by the scent of a lone wolf, weak and wounded. She should have been terrified, should have been praying to the moon goddess for a miracle. Instead, she felt something else rising through the grief, cold and sharp as a blade being forged in ice. Rage. They had taken everything from her. Her mate, her home, her name, her safety. But they would never take this child. She would survive this forest. She would survive the rogues and the cold and the curse of the Deadlands. And she would raise her baby to be everything Edris had failed to see in her. Loyal, fierce, and worthy of a crown he would never deserve to wear. Her hand found a fallen branch beside her, thick enough to serve as a weapon. The wood was rough against her palm, grounding her. We survived tonight, she whispered to the life inside her. And tomorrow, we become something they'll never see coming. In the darkness, golden light flickered briefly in her eyes. A promise and a prophecy beginning to wake. Beyond the border, the rogues found her at dawn. Celia had managed maybe an hour of fitful sleep before the snap of a twig jolted her awake. She scrambled to her feet, gripping the branch she'd claimed as a weapon, her body screaming in protest. Every muscle ached from the cold, from the broken bond, from carrying grief like stones in her chest. 3 wolves emerged from the mist, their fur matted and eyes vacant with madness. Rogues who'd lived too long without a pack, without purpose, until their humanity had rotted away and left only hunger behind. The largest one, a mottled gray male with scars crisscrossing his muzzle, circled her slowly, lips peeled back to reveal yellowed fangs. The other 2 flanked her sides, cutting off any escape. I don't want trouble, Celia said, hating how her voice shook. I'm just passing through. The gray wolf laughed, a sound that came out twisted and wrong from his throat. No one passes through the Deadlands, pretty Luna. His nostrils flared, scenting her. And you smell like fresh meat. Like Pack. I'm not Pack anymore, she spat, something bitter rising in her throat. I'm nothing. Even better. The gray wolf lunged. Celia swung the branch with everything she had. It connected with his skull with a satisfying crack, sending him sprawling. But the other two were already moving, flanking her from both sides. She spun, swinging wildly, but her exhausted body couldn't keep up. Claws raked across her shoulder, tearing through fabric and flesh. She screamed. The gray wolf recovered, shaking his head as blood dripped from a gash above his eye. Feisty. I like that. Makes the kill more interesting. He lunged again. And this time Celia knew she was too slow. She raised her arms to protect her stomach, protect the baby, and brace for teeth that would end everything. Instead, light exploded from her palms. Golden fire erupted outward in a shockwave, slamming into all three rogues and hurling them backward through the air. They hit trees with bone-breaking force, their howls of pain cutting through the forest. Celia stared at her hands, watching the golden flames dance across her skin without burning, without pain. What? The gray wolf struggled to his feet, his eyes wide with something Celia had never seen in a rogue before. Fear. You're one of them. Bloodline. He backed away limping. We didn't know. We would never have. Leave, Celia heard herself say, her voice no longer shaking but ringing with command. Leave now, or I'll turn you to ash. She had no idea if she could actually do that. The power humming through her veins felt wild, uncontrolled, like holding lightning in her fist. But the rogues didn't wait to find out. They scattered into the forest, their panicked howls fading into the distance. Celia collapsed to her knees, the golden light guttering out like a candle flame. Her hands were shaking again, but now it wasn't from fear. It was from the aftershock of power she'd never known she possessed. Royal bloodline. Her grandmother had mentioned it once, years ago, dismissing it as diluted beyond relevance. The gold had skipped generations, sleeping dormant in her DNA, while stronger wolves ruled. She'd never shown a single sign of it before tonight. Until Edris had rejected her. Until she'd been pushed to the absolute edge of survival. She pressed her hands to her stomach again, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath. Did you do this? She whispered. Are you already protecting us? The baby of course didn't answer, but Celia felt something settle inside her chest, filling the hollow space where the mate bond had been with something different, something that belonged to her alone. She looked deeper into the Deadlands, where the mist curled around ancient trees and the shadows promised either death or transformation. For the first time since the banishment, Celia smiled. All right, little one, she murmured, pulling herself to her feet. Let's see what else we can do. The forest watched as the exiled Luna walked forward, golden light still flickering faintly beneath her skin. A banished queen learning to claim her crown. The Alpha's decay. 3 years later, the Silver Moon Pack was dying. Alpha Edris stood at the window of his study, staring out at lands that had once thrived under his leadership. Now the fields lay barren, crops withering in soil that had turned gray and lifeless. The river that cut through Pack territory ran sluggish and dark, fish floating belly up along its banks. Even the forest seemed to be retreating, trees shedding their leaves out of season, their branches skeletal and accusing. The blight, his healers called it. A rot that had started the morning after Celia's banishment, and spread like poison through everything the Pack touched. Alpha. Marcus, his beta, entered without knocking, a liberty Edris no longer had the energy to correct. Another family is leaving. The Thorntons. That makes 15 this month. Edris didn't turn from the window. Let them go. We can't afford to lose more wolves. Our numbers are already. I said let them go. The words came out as a snarl, and Edris felt his wolf stir for the first time in weeks, violent and resentful. He pressed his palms against the window frame, forcing himself to breathe. Apologize to Marcus, his wolf demanded in the back of his mind, but Edris couldn't find the words. Marcus was silent for a long moment. You need to shift, Edris. You haven't let your wolf out in over a month. It's not healthy. My wolf doesn't want to come out. The admission tasted like ash. His wolf hadn't been right since that night 3 years ago. Since the moment he'd spoken the words that severed the mate bond. It had howled for weeks afterward, clawing at Edris's insides, demanding they go after her, find her, fix what they'd broken. Edris had refused. The law was absolute. She'd betrayed them. The evidence had been clear. Except it hadn't been. 6 months after the banishment, a merchant had come forward with information about the letter. How he'd seen Marcus's cousin, Elena, forging documents in a tavern. By the time Edris had investigated, Elena had fled south and Marcus's family had closed ranks, claiming ignorance. The trail went cold. But the doubt had taken root, spreading through Edris's certainty like the blight spread through his lands. What if he'd been wrong? He'd sent search parties into the Deadlands, of course. All of them had returned empty-handed. Some not returning at all. The forest had swallowed Celia whole. And if she'd survived even a week in that cursed place, it would have been a miracle. She was dead. She had to be. No wolf survived the Deadlands. So why did his wolf still search for her scent on the wind every morning? The pack needs their alpha, Marcus said quietly. They need to see strength. They need a miracle, Edris corrected, his voice hollow. Something I can't give them. A knock at the door interrupted them. Edris's head healer, old Mara, entered with a bundle of scrolls tucked under her arm. Her face was grave. Alpha, I found something. In the old texts, the ones from before the Great Division. Edris finally turned from the window. What? Mara spread the scrolls across his desk, her gnarled fingers tracing ancient symbols. The blight isn't a disease. It's a curse. A punishment from the land itself when, she paused, her eyes meeting his with something that looked like pity. When sacred bonds are broken unjustly. When a true mate is cast out without cause. The room went cold. Celia, Edris breathed. The name he hadn't spoken aloud in 3 years, scraping his throat raw. If she lives, Mara continued carefully, she's the only one who can break it. The bond must be restored or, she gestured to the window, to the dying lands beyond. This spreads until there's nothing left. Marcus moved closer. But she's dead. No one survives the Deadlands. You said so yourself. I was wrong. The words came out broken. Edris gripped the edge of his desk, feeling his wolf surge up with sudden, desperate hope. I was wrong about everything. His wolf howled inside his chest, a sound of pure anguish and longing. Find her. Find our mate. Fix this. For the first time in 3 years, Edris and his wolf agreed on something. Prepare a search party, Edris commanded, his voice taking on the steel that had been absent for months. We leave at dawn. And if we find her? Marcus asked. Edris looked down at his hands, remembering how they'd trembled when he'd signed the banishment order. Then I beg. Child of prophecy. Mama watch. Celia looked up from the rabbit she was skinning to see her son standing in the clearing, his small hands outstretched toward a wilting flower. Leo was 3 years old, with wild dark curls that refused to be tamed and eyes that burned like molten gold in the afternoon light. Eyes that were nothing like hers, everything like his father's. Eyes she both loved and feared in equal measure. Leo, careful, she warned, wiping her hands on her leather tunic. Remember what we talked about. Your gift needs to stay hidden when others are near. But there's no one here, he protested with the logic only a toddler could muster. Just you and me and the flower, that's sad. Before Celia could stop him, Leo pressed his palms together and then opened them slowly, as if releasing a butterfly. Golden light spilled from his hands, warm and pure, flowing toward the dying flower like liquid sunlight. The wilted petals straightened, color flooding back into them, until the bloom stood tall and vibrant, more alive than it had been even before it started dying. Celia's breath caught. Every time Leo used his power, it was stronger than the last. See, Leo beamed at her, proud as any child showing off a new trick. I made it happy again. She crossed the clearing and knelt beside him, cupping his face in her hands. You did beautifully, little son. But you must be careful. This power you have, it's special. It makes you special. And sometimes people fear what's special. Leo's smile faltered. Like the bad wolves who tried to hurt us? Yes. Celia pulled him into her arms, breathing in the scent of pine and wild honey that clung to his hair. In 3 years, she'd built a life here in the Deadlands, a small shelter fortified against rogues, a garden that somehow thrived despite the cursed soil, and a reputation among the outcasts who wandered these woods. The exiled Luna who commanded golden fire. The woman who couldn't be killed. But Leo was her greatest secret and her greatest vulnerability. She'd known he was special from the moment he was born. The labor had been brutal, alone in her shelter with only instinct to guide her. But when Leo had finally slipped into the world, screaming and perfect, his eyes had opened to reveal pure gold. Not the amber of normal wolves, but the radiant gold of the ancient bloodline, undiluted and absolute. The true heir. Just like the prophecy her grandmother had whispered about in stories Celia had thought were just fairy tales. When the moon bleeds and the alpha fails, a child born of broken bonds shall rise. Gold in his eyes, healing in his hands, he shall unite what was torn asunder. Mama. Leo pulled back to look at her, his little brow furrowed with concern that no 3-year-old should have to carry. Why are you sad? I'm not sad, my love. I'm just. She brushed a curl from his forehead. I'm thinking about how much you've grown. A rustle in the underbrush made her tense immediately. Her hand went to the knife at her belt as she pushed Leo behind her. But it was only Kira, the rogue she'd saved from a bear trap last winter, emerging from the tree line with a brace of rabbits. Easy, Celia, Kira said, holding up her free hand. Just me. Celia relaxed fractionally. In 3 years, she'd learned trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. But Kira had proven herself loyal, and the small network of outcasts Celia had gathered needed every hunter they could get. Kira's eyes landed on the revived flower, then flicked to Leo with knowing concern. He did it again? He's getting stronger, Celia admitted quietly. That's good, isn't it? If the rumors are true about the blight spreading. The blight isn't our problem anymore. Celia's voice came out harder than she intended. Silver Moon made their choice. Let them live with it. But even as she said it, she felt the lie in her bones. Because Leo asked about his father sometimes, in the way children do, casual questions that cut like knives. Do I have a papa? Where is he? Why doesn't he live with us? She'd never told him the truth. How could she explain that his father had thrown them away? That the man whose eyes Leo had inherited had chosen law over love, pride over family? Leo tugged on her tunic. Mama, can I show Kira the butterflies I helped yesterday? Despite everything, Celia smiled. Just for a little while. Then we need to practice your shielding. As Leo scampered off with Kira, chattering excitedly about the monarch butterflies he'd healed, Celia stared at the golden flower swaying in the breeze. Somewhere beyond the Deadlands, a pack was dying. And here, hidden in the forest they feared, their salvation grew stronger every day. A child who could heal curses, who carried the future in his small hands. A child his father didn't even know existed. Search party. The seer lived in a cave at the edge of where Silver Moon territory bled into the Deadlands. A place most wolves avoided, where the air itself felt wrong and shadows moved independent of light. Edris stood at the cave's entrance with Marcus and 4 of his strongest warriors, each of them armed with silver blades and protective charms that old Mara had insisted they wear. The charms felt heavy against Edris's chest, a constant reminder of how desperate things had become. This is madness, Marcus muttered. Seers are charlatans, Edris. They tell you what you want to hear for a price. Then she'll tell me Celia is alive, Edris said flatly. And I'll pay whatever she asks. He didn't wait for Marcus's response before ducking into the cave. The interior was larger than it appeared from outside. Walls lined with candles that burned with flames of unnatural colors, green, violet, silver. Bones hung from the ceiling on leather cords, swaying despite the absence of wind. And in the center of it all sat a woman so ancient her skin looked like parchment, her eyes milky white with cataracts. Alpha Edris Belmont, she said without turning to look at him, her voice like grinding stones. The wolf who comes crawling after 3 years of silence. How the mighty do fall. Edris's jaw tightened. I need to know if she's alive. Celia Belmont. The word caught in his throat. My former mate. Former, the seer repeated, and somehow made it sound like an accusation. You still can't even claim her properly. Even now, standing at the precipice of your pack's extinction, you hide behind words like former and need, when what you mean is love and destroyed. Just answer the question, Edris growled. Is she alive? The seer finally turned to face him, and despite her blindness, Edris felt like she was seeing straight through to his rotted core. Seat. This will require blood. Edris sat cross-legged before her without hesitation. She produced a curved blade from her robes, and held out her gnarled hand expectantly. He placed his palm in hers and didn't flinch when she cut deep, his blood dripping into a bronze bowl between them. She began to chant in a language older than the pack's, her fingers stirring his blood with movements that seemed choreographed by something beyond human knowledge. The candles around them flared brighter, their colored flames dancing wildly. Then she went rigid, her blind eyes rolling back until only whites showed. She lives, the seer hissed. The banished queen lives and thrives where you sent her to die. She has become what you could never see. Powerful, fierce, reborn from the ashes of your rejection. Relief hit Edris so hard he swayed. Where is she? Deep in the heart of the Deadlands, where the old magic still remembers the true bloodlines. She has built a sanctuary from your exile, gathered the broken pieces you discarded and forged them into something stronger than your precious pack laws. I'll go to her, Edris said immediately. I'll bring her back, restore the bond. Fool. The word cracked like a whip. You think she wants your bond? You think she's been waiting 3 years for you to realize your mistake? The seer's laughter was bitter and sharp. She has moved beyond you, Alpha. And she is not alone. Edris's heart stuttered. What do you mean, not alone? The seer's head tilted, as if listening to voices only she could hear. The answer to your blight walks beside her in small feet, golden eyes that mirror yours. A child born of betrayal, who carries the salvation you threw away. The world tilted. A child. Edris whispered. You have nothing, the seer snapped. That child knows no father. That woman owes you no second chance. Your only hope is her mercy, and you gave her every reason to have none. Marcus stepped forward from the cave entrance. If she can break the curse, we'll make her come back. By force if necessary. The seer's laugh was like breaking glass. Try to take her by force, and she'll burn you all to cinders. The true heir does not suffer tyrants, and neither does his mother anymore. Edris's mind raced, fragments of impossible truth assembling into devastating clarity. Celia had been pregnant when he banished her. She'd walked into the Deadlands carrying his child and never said a word. She'd survived. She'd given birth alone. She'd raised their son for 3 years while Edris sat in his study watching his pack crumble. How do I reach her? His voice came out broken. How do I even begin to? You walk into the forest that terrifies you, the seer said simply. You face the darkness you condemned her to, and when you find her, she allows you to find her. You fall to your knees and beg for a forgiveness you don't deserve. She leaned forward, her blind eyes somehow locking onto his. And you pray, Alpha Belmont, that a mother's love for her dying people is stronger than her hatred for the man who destroyed her. The Queen of Outcasts. The Deadlands looked different than Edris remembered. 3 years ago, his search parties had reported nothing but decay and madness. Twisted trees, poisoned water, rogues that had forgotten their human shapes. But as his group pushed deeper into the forest following rumors of a miracle healer, he saw signs of something impossible. Life. Gardens growing in careful rows between the trees. Smoke rising from what looked like chimneys. The sound of children's laughter echoing through woods that should have been silent as graves. Alpha, one of his warriors whispered, pointing ahead. The settlement. Edris's breath caught. It wasn't a settlement. It was a fortress. Wooden walls rose 20 feet high, reinforced with metal plating and sharpened stakes. Guard towers stood at each corner, manned by wolves whose posture spoke of military discipline. The gates were iron, inscribed with symbols that made Edris's skin prickle with recognition. Old magic, the kind his grandmother had warned him was forbidden. And above it all, a banner flew that made his wolf surge forward with desperate recognition. Silver moon on black fabric. Celia's colors. But the moon was broken in half, one piece falling, the other rising like a phoenix. "We mean no harm," Edris called out to the guards. "I'm Alpha Edris Belmont of Silver Moon Pack. I seek an audience with your leader." Silence. Then laughter rippled along the walls, not mocking, but genuinely amused. "Silver Moon," one guard called down. "You're a long way from home, Alpha. And you're not welcome here." "I'm searching for someone," Edris pressed. "A healer. I was told she could." "We know why you're here." A new voice cut through the air, and the iron gates began to open with a groan of metal on metal. What emerged made Edris's heart stop. The woman wore armor, black leather and steel plates that moved with her like a second skin. Her dark hair was bound in an intricate braid woven with silver thread, and her stance spoke of a warrior who'd seen battle and won. Behind her walked a dozen wolves, each bearing weapons and scars, their eyes hard and loyal. But it was her face that shattered him. "Celia," he breathed. She stopped 10 paces from him, and Edris saw what 3 years in the Dead Lands had forged. Gone was the soft-spoken Luna who deferred to his judgment. This woman stood like a general surveying an enemy force, her expression carved from ice and fury. "That name is dead," she said, her voice carrying command that made even his warriors shift uncomfortably. "I am Celia Ashbourne now, Queen of the Forgotten, and you are trespassing. I need to speak with you. Please, it's about the blight." "I know about your blight." She crossed her arms, the movement making her armor catch the light. "I've known for 3 years. Every refugee that reaches my gates tells the same story. Silver Moon is dying, and its Alpha is finally desperate enough to seek the woman he condemned to death." The words hit like physical blows. Edris took a step forward, and stopped when every weapon on the wall raised in his direction. "I was wrong," he said, the admission tearing from his chest. "The evidence was false. You were framed, and I destroyed everything because I was too proud to see it." "You destroyed nothing." Celia's eyes flashed with that golden fire he'd only seen once before, the night of her banishment. "I was not destroyed, Edris. I was reforged. Every wolf behind these walls is someone your precious pack laws threw away. Omegas deemed too weak. Wolves who loved the wrong gender. Children born of unsuitable bloodlines. I took your exile and built an empire from outcasts." She gestured to the fortress behind her, to the wolves watching from the walls, to the gardens and homes visible through the open gates. "This is what your rejection created. Not a broken woman begging for your mercy, but a queen who learned she never needed your approval to be powerful." Edris's wolf whined, a sound of pure anguish. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but my pack is dying. Our lands are rotting. The seer said only you can break the curse." "And why?" Celia asked, her voice dangerously soft. "Would I save the pack that exiled me? The people who watched you banish a pregnant woman and did nothing?" The world went silent. "You knew," Edris whispered. "When I banished you, you knew you were carrying my son," Celia finished. "Not yours. Mine. You forfeited that right the moment you chose your laws over your mate." Behind her, the gates opened wider, and a small figure emerged. A boy with wild dark curls and eyes that burned like captured sunlight. Edris looked at his son for the first time, and felt his heart break completely. The child who could have saved them all. The heir he'd never known. The family he'd thrown away. "His name is Leo," Celia said, her hand moving protectively to the boy's shoulder. "And he's the only reason I haven't already told you to leave and never return." "The blood reckoning." "Show him," Celia said quietly, her hand still resting on Leo's shoulder. The boy looked up at her, uncertainty flickering across his young face. "Mama, are you sure? He needs to see what he threw away, what he chose his pride over." Edris watched, frozen, as Leo stepped forward. The child couldn't have been more than 3 years old, small for his age, but he moved with a grace that made Edris's wolf recognize its own blood. The shift began. It should have been impossible. Most wolves didn't experience their first shift until puberty, sometimes later. But Leo's transformation was fluid, natural, as if he'd been born knowing how to move between skins. Golden light rippled across the child's body, and then where a boy had stood, a wolf cub emerged. But this was no ordinary wolf. His fur gleamed like captured sunlight, each strand shimmering between gold and silver as he moved. The color of an alpha's bloodline. The color of the Belmont legacy that Edris's grandfather had passed to him. Impossible to fake. Impossible to deny. Gods! One of Edris's warriors breathed behind him. The child is yours, Alpha. The cub, his son, sat back on his haunches and tilted his head, studying Edris with eyes that held far too much intelligence for such a young wolf. Then Leo did something that drove the knife deeper into Edris's chest. He turned his back and trotted to Celia, pressing against her legs in a gesture of trust and protection, claiming her as his only parent, rejecting the father who'd never known he existed. 3 years old, Celia said, her voice cutting through Edris's spiraling thoughts. He shifted for the first time at 18 months. The seer says he's the most powerful young wolf she's ever encountered. She stroked Leo's golden fur, and the cub made a contented sound that shattered something in Edris's soul. Your bloodline combined with mine created something extraordinary. A child who could have united our pack, strengthened our borders, brought prosperity for generations. Leo shifted back, the transformation as effortless as breathing. The naked boy immediately wrapped himself in the cloak Celia held out, then peered at Edris with solemn curiosity. You're the alpha who hurt my mama, Leo said, his child's voice carrying an edge of judgment that made grown warriors flinch. She cried for weeks. I heard her, even before I was born. The admission hit Edris like a physical blow. He dropped to his knees, heedless of the mud and his warriors' shocked gasps. An alpha never knelt, never showed weakness. But this wasn't weakness, this was devastation. I'm sorry, he choked out, the words inadequate, pathetic. I'm so sorry. Your apologies mean nothing here, Celia said, but he heard something crack in her voice. The smallest fracture in her armor. You didn't just exile me, Edris. You sentenced your own child to death in the Deadlands. Only my will to survive, only the other outcasts who found me and taught me to fight, kept us alive long enough to build this. She gestured to the fortress, to the wolves watching from the walls. Every person here knows what it means to be thrown away by someone who claimed to love them. We are the unwanted, the rejected, the condemned. And we survived because we learned the only person you can truly trust is yourself. Edris looked at his son, at the golden-furred miracle he'd never known, and understood the full weight of his crime. Not just betraying his mate, not just destroying an innocent woman based on false evidence, but murdering his own legacy, his pack's future, his chance at the family he'd always secretly wanted. What do I do? He whispered. How do I fix this? Celia's laugh was sharp as broken glass. You can't. Some things, once destroyed, cannot be rebuilt. You made your choice 3 years ago. Now you live with the consequences. She turned toward the gates, Leo's hand clasped firmly in hers. Wait, Edris called desperately. The blight. The seer said. I know what the seer said. Celia looked back, her expression unreadable. The curse can only be broken by the one who was wronged. By me. And maybe I'll consider it. She paused, letting the words hang. But first, you're going to learn what it means to beg. The new blood. The children's shelter held 17 young wolves, the youngest barely 2 years old. Edris and his squad reached it just as the blight's vines punched through the eastern wall, black tendrils seeking small, terrified prey. Get them out! Edris roared, driving his spear through a vine thick as his arm, through the tunnel to the keep. But there were too many vines moving too fast and not enough warriors. One tendril wrapped around a little girl's ankle, and her scream of pain cut through the chaos. A flash of golden light exploded across the shelter. Leo stood in the doorway, small and trembling, his hands outstretched and glowing with power that made the air shimmer. Where the light touched, the blight recoiled, hissing and writhing like a living thing in agony. Leo, no. Celia's voice carried from somewhere behind them. You're not strong enough yet. But the boy didn't stop. His eyes had turned completely gold, burning with ancient magic that shouldn't exist in such a young wolf. The light spread from his hands, washing over the corrupted vines, and something impossible happened. The blight began to heal. Black turned to green. Decay reversed into new growth. The twisted, corrupted plants straightened, bloomed, became whole again. The transformation spread outward like ripples in a pond, racing across the settlement, through the forest, toward Silver Moon's borders miles away. Leo collapsed. Edris caught him before he hit the ground, cradling his son for the first time. The boy was burning with fever, his small body shaking from the effort of channeling power that would have killed most adult wolves. What did he do? Edris whispered as Celia reached them, her face pale with fear and wonder. Bloodline magic, she said, taking Leo from his arms with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with her warrior's stance. The kind that hasn't been seen in generations. Your alpha heritage combined with my healing gifts created something new. Something powerful enough to cure corruption at its source. She pressed her hand to Leo's forehead, and some of that golden light flickered between them. The boy's breathing steadied, his fever breaking. He'll live, Celia said. But he'll need weeks to recover. He gave everything he had. Around them, wolves were emerging from their defensive positions, staring in awe at forests that were green and whole again. The blight was gone. Not just driven back, but cured, healed, made clean. The curse is broken, one of Marcus's warriors breathed. The Deadlands are alive again. Edris looked at Celia, at the woman who'd survived his betrayal and built an empire from ashes. You saved my pack. Leo saved everything. I have no right to ask for anything more, but you're going to anyway? Her voice was sharp, but he heard the exhaustion beneath it. The fear for their son. The weight of 3 years carrying burdens alone. I want to earn you back, he said quietly. Not as your mate. I know that bond is broken. But as someone worthy of standing beside you. Of being Leo's father. Let me prove I've changed. Celia was silent for a long moment. Her hand still resting protectively on their unconscious son. You don't get to be his father by wanting it, she finally said. You earned that title through years of showing up, of putting him first, of proving you understand what it means to love someone more than your own pride. She met his eyes, and he saw no forgiveness there. Only brutal honesty. You can stay. You can try. But I'm not your mate anymore, Edris Belmont. I'm Celia Ashbourne, Queen of the Forgotten. And if you want any place in my life or Leo's, you'll have to earn it from the ground up. No assumptions based on what we once were. She stood, lifting Leo with the ease of practice. You start by learning to follow before you ever lead again. You start by understanding that love isn't ownership. And you start by accepting that I may never forgive you, but I'm willing to see if you can become someone worth forgiving. Edris watched her walk away, carrying their miracle child, and felt something shift in his chest. Not hope, he didn't deserve that yet. But purpose. He would earn her trust. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Even if it took the rest of his life. We have come to the end of this story. What lessons did you learn? Please kindly drop it on the comments section below and remember to like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching.